Hello, hello. Hi, I'm Kim Rasmussen, and you're listening or watching Glad in Your Heart, a podcast, vlog, video that lightens and lifts and helps you see that pursuing a glad heart is just really about seeking a fresh perspective that will bring more connection with yourself, with God, and with the world. And I'm a little behind on this come follow me connection that I like to do. And today is really not going to be a connection to come follow me much at all, but more about President Nelson's talk he gave to the YSAs a few weeks ago. And he talked about labels. And so I want to talk a little bit about burnout when it comes to labels. So, what are some of your labels? I am a wife, a mom, a grandma, a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a great aunt, a granddaughter. My grandmother is still alive. Isn't that amazing? A niece. I'm a sister-in-law. I'm a daughter-in-law. I'm a cousin. I'm a mother-in-law too. I should mention that, right? A cousin, a niece. I'm a Christian. I'm a Texan. I'm a life coach. I'm a teacher. I'm a baker. I'm a tutor. I'm a mathematician. I'm a musician. I could go on, right? I am a Spanish speaker, right? I could just keep going. When we think about all of our labels, I'm a Relief Society president, right? I'm a ministering sister. Um, I I like the idea that these labels, I don't know, I think we segment ourselves a little bit sometimes with all of our labels. But what I love, if you're thinking about your labels, right? What do we think about those labels? What response do we have inside of ourselves when we hear these labels, right? So I sometimes think, what would the mom, me, do in this situation? Or the Relief Society president, me, or the teacher, me, or the coach, me, or the friend, me? What would I do, right? And when I say that, I mean the mom in me, right? Or the Relief Society president in me, or the coach in me, the daughter in me, right? The teacher in me, right? Sometimes I'll find myself in a Sunday school lesson and I just want to make a comment, and then I'll have this thought, and it's just a very human tendency. I'm like, oh, but you're the Relief Society president. Make sure that you're making a comment, and I'm like, no, I'm just a person here in the ward learning just like everybody else. I'm not trying to teach anything. I'm just having an experience, right? Like everybody else. So I just think it's interesting, right? That sometimes these little things pop into our head and we're like, oh, but you're this. And so you need to do this, right? And we have these expectations that we bring with us that kind of connect with these labels that we have, right? So I don't have to identify myself in these segmented ways. I could just be myself and show up in myself in all of my different responsibilities or in all of my different labels. It's right. It's just really interesting. And so President Nelson talked a little bit about this, right? And he said um, he suggests that we have three main labels: child of God, child of the covenant, and disciple of Christ. And that if we pay attention to those three labels, all of the other labels, I think, take care of themselves. And Wendy Nelson also mentioned, like, what would a faithful young adult do? She was asking that question, right? And so I think these are good questions, but I would also say that it depends on who we are, right? When I was on my mission I'm a perfectionist, right? And at that time, I was like following all the rules. And then the mission president would come out and say, we need to do more of this and more of this and more of this. And I'm like, okay, I got to do more of this and more of this and more of this. And I was already doing all of the other things. And others would hear that and go, okay, I'm going to step it up. And it didn't cause them to stress out. Me, like, I was like, how can I do more? Like, how can I do more? What more can I do? And I really did burn out. Like, I ended up coming home sick off my mission early, and no doctor could say why, except my body broke down under the stress response that I created. And I just think this is so interesting because we all are different. So when we hear something from the pulpit, or if we hear something on the talk, or we read something in the scriptures, or whatever, right? I would just say, like, you're you, and you get to decide what that means for you. And so when I talk today a little bit about burnout, I hope that it lightens you up. I hope that you can feel like, oh, I've been like making this so heavy all the time. And instead of like having a light, joyful life and still doing the things. Like, I'm not saying don't do the things, right? But we get to have a different perspective around it. I just think we see all the hundreds of things that we have on our list. Remember last time when I told you I was like thinking, oh, there's so much to do, so many thoughts, right? I said, I have so many thoughts. And then I started writing them down and it turned out not to be as much as I thought. And I would venture to say, I would offer that that may be true um, about your list of to-dos. Every week when I write down my list, I just think I can never get all of this done this week. There's no way. Then I go to my calendar and I put my to-dos into my calendar, and I'm like, okay, I do have time. And I even have time for free time. Like, honestly, I schedule my free time first. I'm like, I want to make sure. And when I say free time, I mean, that could be different for everybody. But like, what I'm saying is, I have my list of things I need to do around my house. I have my list of the things that I need to do for my business. I have the list of things I need to do for my calling. And I have things that I want to do in my scripture study. Right. And so those are things I would not necessarily classify as free time. You can totally like do whatever you want. But I also put in like, I'm like crocheting some little washcloths that I just learned how to crochet. Right. And so here's an example of, right, something that I'm working on. So fun. And so I'm like, I I'm doing that while I'm watching a TV show or while I'm listening to a book. And I call that free time. And I'm doing, even though, right, I am doing it for somebody else, and you're going to talk, you're going to laugh later when I talk about some things, but I enjoy it. And the me watching a show part, like, I like that. And I like that I'm crocheting. I like that. And it fills me up, right? Going for a walk, I would call that free time, but it's also taking care of myself, right? Reading my scriptures, even though I schedule it, I have a time for it, it still fills me up. Like, we need to schedule things for ourselves that fill us up. And that free time could be that, right? Spending time with my friends, talking on the phone with my mom or my kids, my grandma. I'm going to call her tomorrow. And just, right. And consuming material that I love, like listening to coaches. Like, I just love it. I could binge watch that all day long, but it can become, right, a little bit lopsided in my schedule. But like, these are things that I schedule, and then there's things that I schedule, right? My list, my to-dos. And I'm just saying that in our head, all of those things can seem so big. And then when we go and put it on our calendar, we find it's not so big. And I'm going to talk much more about time in another podcast. But the idea is that's what we have to offer in our life, in this life, right? Is our time, and how we use that time in service, how we use it for ourselves, and how do we use it in our roles, but in our labels. But it's how we show up that matters in those moments, right? And that's kind of what I want to talk about here. So when we hear the word like a balanced life, I used to be so confused about that because I thought it meant I have I'm like I like the spoke of the wheel. Maybe some of you have seen this, and you have all of these things, right, that we do in our lives and all of these labels that we have. And I need to be spending equal time, right, in all of those. It's not about the time, right? It really isn't. It's about the priority that those things are. And they're not separate things, honestly. Like I feel like with my priority is I'm serving God and I'm loving him and I'm worshiping him, that's going to be in all of those areas, right? As a mom, I'm going to be serving God. As a wife, I'm going to be serving God. As a daughter, I'm going to be serving God. As a coach, I'm going to be serving God. As a teacher, I'm serving God. As a math tutor, I'm serving God. Like I'm bringing that with me. I'm all of those things. And so that's what I love. Like I can do that in 100 different ways, serve God or serve his children, and I'm still having joy. It's not like a to-do list. I'm not feeling stress over it, right? So we're not segmented, right? And especially as women, we don't. Men, maybe. I'm not a man. I don't know. But sometimes I tend to compartmentalize too in my life. And when I do that, I lose sight of myself because I'm not connected to what I'm doing. It's just like I'm doing a checklist of things, right? And I think I've talked a little bit about this before too. That's what leads me to burnout. I have the checklist of all the things and I'm like, oh, there's so much. I remember as a teacher, I burnt out. I remember as a mom, like with little kids, I burnt out. And then as a mom with a teenager and little kids, I burned out. And it was like I was just doing all the things, but I wasn't connected to them at all. And I love this idea that we can prevent burnout in that way, being connected to ourselves the whole time. So what I used to do is, and you heard me tell you what I do, what I used to do is do all the things on my list. And then with whatever time was left over, I would do what I wanted. And it might not even be the thing that would really fill me. It was just like, finally. And then I'd be tired and I didn't even have the energy to do anything that I wanted to do. Right. So it turned into, I can veg. I could just like turn on a show and chill, which fine. Right. But really wasn't what would fill me, wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. I want to read a book. I was too tired by the end of the night, right, to read a book. I was falling asleep. And so I remember learning here and there. I had pockets of times before I knew this work where I would, okay, I'm going to read. I got 15 minutes. I'm going to read. My daughter is really good about this. She's got an 18-month-old and she reads for fun. And she does all the other things too. She bakes for fun and she does all the other things too. And she does that because she knows that she needs it. Like she's a lot wiser than I ever was at that age. And I know that the things I did, I enjoyed doing, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't replenishing myself all along the way. And so it got to the point where it wasn't sustainable anymore. And so let me give you some examples. Like I would work on my hobbies. Like I love doing needlework. This is a new thing for me, learning how to crochet, but I liked cross stitching. I was learning how to piece things together and applicate them, but I would only do it if I was giving it away. I felt like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this because I'm making this for my sister-in-law to hang in her home. What a fun thing to learn, but I'm giving it to her. And the things I would learn to do, or maybe I would make something and put it in my home, but it generally, right. And a lot of things I did do, I take that back because I learned how to sew because I wanted the result of having a slip cover for my couches because they were ugly and I couldn't afford to buy a new one. And so I would, right. And I learned how to do these things from that place, which is okay, but maybe not. I don't know. I think I burned myself out a little bit with that mentality. I wouldn't hang out with my friends unless I was really doing something productive. I remember getting together with friends and I would have my photos with me and I'd be organizing them and we'd be spending time together. I can just spend time with my friends. I don't need to be doing something, right? But that's what my mindset kind of was. And I even picked that up from a friend of mine because I was like, oh, how good. That's a great idea. I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring stuff. It's just so funny what we do. I wouldn't play the piano for fun. I'd play the piano if I had to do something in church, or I wouldn't sing for fun unless I was asked to sing at church. What? Like, I can just do it for fun. Now I do. Now I'll go down and I'll just play the piano for fun. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to pull up some Greatest Showman music from my subscription to Scribd, which I just love. And I'm going to play for fun and I'm going to sing for fun. And it's just fun. I just love it. And otherwise, I didn't do it unless there was time left over. Right? Spoiler alert. No time left over. Right? Like I just said, I was exhausted by the end of the day. I went to bed to fill my tank just a little bit so that I could do the rest of the stuff I needed to do. And then there's this other side of it, right? During the day, I didn't want to be interrupted with a phone call or a visit or an assignment. Like those things would hang over my head because I'd rather to be doing this other thing. And so even if I did take time to do something I enjoyed, in my head, I was like, no, but I have all this other stuff that I'm supposed to be doing instead. I'm in charge of the road show. Why am I not working on that? And instead I'm making a what were they called? Roman shade for my kitchen, right? Because I didn't have anything blocking the light from coming in. So funny, right? And again, bringing the thoughts together, the emotions, like I was a hot mess. I am still, but I wasn't as aware, right, of that it's okay to be a hot mess. I didn't know that then. So I didn't want to be interrupted. And so then somebody would call and I'd be like, and then how long do I have to keep talking? And then I would find myself enjoying the conversation. And then I'm like, oh, but I have so much to do. And I would just feel, and then I would even think, oh, but they don't want to talk to me this long. I just had all of this chatter, right? I'm sure some of you relate. I hope you do. I know I'm not the only one that goes through this, right? And so it was robbing me, right, of things. Just a funny thing. And fortunately for me, like I always have felt like studying the scriptures was a positive thing because it was something we've been asked to do. So I didn't feel guilty doing that because it really was. And I was not doing it just to check a box, to be honest. That is one thing I'm grateful for that I have learned from. Like that was my sanity. That was my moment of journaling, of writing down my thoughts, looking at the scriptures, looking for answers to my mess of life that it felt like it at the time because I just felt like I was doing everything for everybody else and nothing for myself. Again, that was my own problem. That was my own thoughts saying that to me. But I am grateful for that. That I did learn to do and I didn't feel guilty doing it. And I loved it. Right. And that would be honestly what I would do in the summers when my kids were home. And I'd be like, okay, you are watching a movie. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to read the scriptures and I'm going to journal and I'm going to think and I'm going to write and all the things I would process and I would just do it. Like I'm so proud of myself for doing that. And I thank that past version of myself so often. But when I would forget to do that, that is when the burnout came in. That is when I was just like burned out. Right. And I would not, right, when I wasn't taking that time in the scriptures for myself, because that really was probably my fill time, I would burn out. I would like, I'm too busy. Once I started teaching school, like I didn't have that time to do that. And I felt myself burning out. I didn't make the time for myself to do that. And the reason that leads to burnout, let me just clarify like what I perceive burnout to mean is we're not filling our emotional resilience tanks. Now, I went to therapy for a while and my therapist would tell me this, you need to fill your tank. And I'm like, I have no idea what you mean by that. Like I did not know, but I was too proud to actually say what. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I understand it now. Like he wouldn't say it like that, like emotional resilience. He would just say your tank. But this makes sense to me. My emotional resilience tank. Like I wasn't allowing myself to feel. I wasn't even acknowledging that I was in stress. I was just go. Got it. It has to get done. It just has to get done. I was like treating myself like a robot. And that's where the burnout came from. But when we are not filling the emotional resilience tank and we keep draining it and draining it and draining it until nothing's left, we burn out. when it's kind of the idea of the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? We're doing all the things, and then that one thing happens that's so small, it breaks us, right? We're just lashing out maybe, or whatever, however it is that we react. We're strong until we're not, right? We're strong until we're empty. So I think of a car, right? Totally makes sense. Like we fill it up with gas, we watch the level of the gas, and we make sure it doesn't go into the area where the light comes on and we end up stranded on the highway, right? We fill it up. And we don't think, well, I'll take time to fill the car after I've done all of the other errands I need to do, and after I've done everything, and then I'll fill it up. Right? We don't do that because we know the tank's going to be empty at that point, but we do it in our lives, right? We don't think of the things that we enjoy, what brings us joy. We don't put ourselves first, right? It's the whole oxygen, like oxygen to yourself, and then you give it to I still know people that struggle with that. They're like, why would I do that? I need to give it to them first. It's like, if you are out of oxygen, how are you going to help them? Right? If you are on low emotional reserve, how are you going to be there emotionally for your family? Right? And so it's interesting. And then here's the other thing, which I think is actually appropriate. This is the year 2022. We're in June, and gas prices are, where I live, they're like, even at Sam's, like $4.79 a gallon. Right? So if you're filling up your tank with gas that is that expensive, you might be careful about how you're using that precious resource, right? And we could do that too, right? I mean, I think of like how when I'm driving around, I'm prioritizing my errands. Maybe I'm not sitting in the parking lot with the car running, talking on the phone, although I did do that the other day and I got a blessing out of it, to be honest. I'll tell you about that if I have a chance sometime. But we were really careful. Like we're like cluster our errands together, right? So that we're not just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? And we might be a little more strategic. I think that's a great thing we can do in our lives with our emotional resilience too. Like how we use our energy to do the different things we have, we might learn to conserve our emotional resilience also. So, when I think of all the different times I've had burnout, like I've mentioned, different times, different burnout, same brain, same way of thinking, right, is what led me to the burnout. Although I was blaming it, right, on everything else, all the other people. So we have a different stress response to things that come up in our lives. And that's what leads to burnout, because our emotional resilience is tied to these stress responses that we have, right? And we're going to feel them differently depending on our nervous system, and even depending on the time or the thing, right? I have different responses in different moments. We might have a freeze response, right? Where you just feel paralyzed. I have this so often, and it's like I start stressing out before a big, like a talk, let's say, right? And I'm like all anxious. And then all of a sudden, like my brain, I don't even know where my brain goes to focus, but it's not on the talk. It's on the fact that I'm in stress response and I can't think clearly. I'm sure you've had this happen to you. And I'm just like stressing, like when we're in anxiety, that happens, right? We have this and well, maybe that's what happens. I'm in this freeze response that leads to anxiety because I'm like stuck, right? And I'm like, or we might be in a flight response, right? Where we just want to run away from it. And our heartbeat races, and and that can also lead to another kind of anxiety, right? Because we're just like, I got to get out of this situation. And then there's the fight response, which I typically fall into, of lashing out. I'm irritable. Whatever, or maybe numbing. That could be part of the freeze response. I just numb out, right? It's like too much shut down, right? And maybe that's why my thoughts are going away. So maybe the freeze and the numbing is the same thing. I honestly don't know. I'm just telling you like some things that I've experienced and different responses that I've had to burnout. And it's going to vary. We're all going to have different responses, and we're all going to have different low levels of our emotional resilience tank, right? We just don't want it to get to the point that we are stranded on the highway. Everyone else is going past us at 70 miles an hour, and we don't know. We don't know how to get out, right? We will hit that wall. I have hit that wall so many times and physically got to the point where, like I said, I came off my mission early. I still finished out my mission at home. I was reassigned to serve in my home mission. And but I had to recoup. Like I had it to replenish. It took me 6 weeks or more to build up to where I could physically get back on track. Emotionally, it was still taking a while, right? This happened to me too when I quit teaching. So I got to such a point of burnout that my body just stopped, literally stopped working. I could not get out of bed. And it's a scary thing, right? And I didn't know that I created this for myself. I didn't know. So we have things that are easy in our lives. We have things that are hard. I'm talking about when you get to that point when your emotional response to the things just takes over, right? And so this burnout is the combination of our thought process and our emotions. And we think a certain way, and then they impact us, impact our nervous system in a certain way, right? And when then we have these, we encounter this stress response. What we do with that stress response is what we do or don't do, right? Is what leads to burnout. So it's helpful to be aware when you are feeling these different things, because then you know you need to replenish, restore the balance, right, of those emotions and feel the emotions. So this is the key, right? Those negative emotions, they're signaling to us that we need to pay attention. And we just are like, no, go away. I don't have time for stress. I need to keep going. Okay. You absolutely need to make the time to process your emotions. Otherwise, you are going to be running out later. I had a friend who I had pneumonia as a result of a burnout, by the way. And she was talking about her husband saying he didn't have time to get the vaccine. He was older. He didn't have time to get the vaccine for pneumonia. And she was like, you don't have time not to. And so he didn't. And then he ended up sick. Right. And so that took a longer amount of time than taking the vaccine would have taken for pneumonia. So it's just interesting, right? Because we think we don't have time, but really we do. We do have time. It's either this amount of time or we're going to give up potentially, right, this huge amount of time or huge amount of energy, right? And so it's helpful to be aware when you find these stress responses popping up, because we all have them. We all have the stress responses. It's what we do with them that is going to, and what we think about things that leads to that ultimate burnout. We think it's our kids. We think it's our boss. We think it's our calendar, our list of things. We think it's our calling, our job, what's happening around the world around us, the gas prices, the political environment, all of it, right? We think that is what's causing us to feel burnout, right? Our brain perceives danger and reacts to it. Okay. So I think of like my grandkids, because a lot of times people will use the analogy of like caveman brain or whatever, and that's fine. But I think of my grandkids, right? They're just little kids, 18 months old, 15, 14, 15 months old. And they are really, they're at the mercy of that lower part of their brain that is keeping them alive. Obviously, they have parents that are keeping them alive too. But they signal to their parents, I need, right? I need. And so they scream, right? They don't have the, especially when they're babies, they don't have the flight response that lets them get up and run, but they have the fight response. It's like scream, right? I need this, my body, right? And their body just, their brain is reacting to these perceived dangers of hunger, of thirst, of being alone, abandonment, right? These things, they're not in danger. They are not in danger, but their brain perceives it that way, right? And that comes up. They don't know, they're learning, but they don't initially know how to override that lower brain mentality of keeping them alive, right? And so I like that idea. And so we are wired in such a way that when we're sleepy, when we're tired, when we are having perceived dangers, our brain reacts. It releases those hormones that speeds up our heart, that tunnels our vision, slows down our digestion, that dulls the pain so that we can run and keep running, right? When we don't have it, we're not in danger. We are not in danger, but we'll see things in the news and our brains don't understand that that's not happening here. It perceives the danger and it releases the hormones and we have the reaction. So it's good to know, right? That that's what's happening and that you can step in with your conscious brain and say, we're not in danger. This isn't happening to me now. It may not ever happen to me. It's happening somewhere else. Or we think it's our fault, right? We tend to do all of this stuff. And our brain is just, that's just our brain doing what it does to keep the human race alive. But we get to feel the response, acknowledge the response. And I'm going to talk more about that in future videos, but just knowing it's a stress response that's creating this, I can feel it like just as I'm talking to you, right? I'm like, oh, all this stuff happening in the world. And I feel my heart racing. And it's like, I'm not experiencing, I'm not in danger right now. Right. But then my brain's like, but you could be, it could happen. We need to be stressed about this. And we need to run and we need to, right? The logical part's not kicking in, saying what I could do in response to this from a planning place, right? It's just responding. And then the heartbeat goes up and then we start having the anxiety and then we start having the stress and it's just happening because that's what our brain those chemicals are in our system. Okay. No, it's not bad. It's not good. It's just happening. Okay. We get to learn how to manage it. Okay. We get to feel it. We can take a deep breath. I used to do this with my kids all the time when they were little, like take a deep breath. Here's some water. Let's calm the system down a little bit. Let's let that cycle through you so that I can talk to you. Have you tried to reason with a kid in a temper tantrum? It doesn't work, right? We let them calm down. We don't get mad at them about it. I did. I got mad at them about it, but then I learned I can't deal with them when they're in that. They're in their stress response. We need to get them out of that, let it complete its cycle, and we need to do the same for us. We don't, though, right? We don't. We tell ourselves that, that we let the stress response come up for things when we're not in danger, and we allow it to stress us out, and we judge ourselves for it. So we compound it. Okay. And we tell ourselves, no, you need to stop. Like you still need to keep going. You still need to whatever, even though we're like, let me just get myself aware that I'm not in a stress response situation right now so that I actually can do the work I need to do. I do this. I'll see an email right from, when I was teaching, I would see an email from parents, certain parents. I'd be just like, dang, right. And I would be already heartbeat ready to read that email, just like, and it was unnecessary. I could have just said, oh, let's just see, let me be curious. Let me see what this email's about before I get all up in the stress response business, right? But it's just being aware, right? I'm just saying, I'm not solving all the burnout problems for you right here and now. Just being aware that it's a stress response from something outside of us, but often from something inside of us also. So we pick up things, right? Beliefs, like, so going back to our label thing, right? We have in our heads expectations of what these labels are. I used to do this when I first got married. It's like, oh, a good wife does all these things, irons the shirts, does all the laundry, cooks the meals, like all that, right? And I did it. So I wasn't always that great at it. And some of the stuff I would drop because I think it was like I was in a little bit of resentment. Like, why am I doing all this? And anyway, it's a whole other thing. But we have these expectations. How many of those expectations do I want to hang on to? Like, how many of those beliefs do I want to hang on to? Why? Why not question myself? And this is what my burnout guide will help you do. Like, you get to decide. Like, I'm not telling you yes or no. You shouldn't do those things. A good wife doesn't have to do those things. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we get to decide, right? We don't have to follow society's rules that we've picked up. And it's going to be different from all of us, right? There's different rules for different folks for some reason, right? That we've picked up. And we get to question them. That's the thing. But when we act on those internal beliefs, we will burn ourselves out. That's what I was doing. I was like, I have to do all these things. I didn't. I don't have to is not a thing. I didn't have to. I was the one writing the manual and following it at the same time. And I could have edited stuff out along the way had I known that I could do that. I'm here to tell you, you can, right? You get to decide what part of the manual that you're writing for yourself, right, do you want to keep doing. And so we create a stress response because we're not keeping up with the things that we want to be doing. And so we become the source of the stress response, and we can't run away from ourselves from that feeling, right? We are the perceived danger in that point. Like, our thoughts, we don't know it's our thoughts. We just know that there's a chemical reaction happening inside of us, and we need to do more. And we think doing more is going to get rid of the response, when in fact it doesn't. Or we might even do the opposite, right? Where we do nothing, which I sometimes would do too as a perfectionist. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do it right. So I'm just not going to do it at all. Right. And so we buffer and we distract ourselves with Facebook or Netflix or alcohol or drugs. I've talked about this before. We go into these buffering activities that numb us, right? The numbing thing I told you that I tend to do when I would get to that point is like, I've done everything and now I'm numb, right? And I'm not even doing anything to replenish. I'm just numb. So we answer the stress response in those ways, right? We answer it by doing more. We answer it by reacting to it. We react, we do the requests. We say yes, yes, yes. We people please. And it doesn't stop the stress response. It just creates more stress response, right? And we compound it, and then it's in our body, and we don't allow it to run through the body, like just to complete the cycle of going through us. And that's what I mean when I say allow an emotion or process an emotion. We need to let it go through us and complete the cycle. It doesn't mean it's not going to come back up again. It will. But we just acknowledge it. We allow it. We don't resist it. We don't fight it. And we don't act on it, react to it, and act on it. We just do let it go through us. It's like, it could be this low buzz, right? The stress response might be this low buzz. And then we perceive that buzz as a danger too. And so then we up level that buzz to like a shock. Like it's like a lightning strike. Like we take it all the way up. It's just off the charts. And then we because we're shaming ourselves over it, and we're judging ourselves. And it's like, when we recognize it, like it's a human thing. We have this human reaction of a stress response. It's okay. How human of me. I have a human brain. This is what human brains do. And I don't have to drain my resilience tank because I don't know how to manage that response. That's where burnout comes from. We also might have little subtle triggers, that subtle self-talk that will trigger the initial initial stress response too, other than an external. Sometimes it's an external thing, right? Like I said, an email or a person that is a circumstance around us that we talk to, and we get all like, oh, I got to do this and do that to make sure they're happy, right? We have all of that, but it's because of our internal talk that the external is a problem. Okay. So we have this internal subtle talk that triggers it. Like, I'm so behind. I have so many emails. I'm never going to get this done on time. I should be more organized. I'm such a procrastinator, right? I need to get better at this. Like these things, these types of self-talk also trigger a stress response. We're doing it. And then we judge ourselves for the stress response. And again, whatever the reason. And then that will drain our emotional resilience tank. So I just wanted you just to kind of be aware of what burnout is, a little bit, very little bit, about where it comes from and how we make it a double whammy. Like we get the stress response whammy, then we judge the stress response, and it's like double whammy, triple whammy, quadruple whammy, whatever Googleplex times RAM, right? Whammy you want to say. Honestly, we just exponentially increase the stress response. There's the math talk coming. I know. So all of this is draining our emotional resilience. And then we're burnt out. Okay. So I don't want you hearing this and going, I'm doing the best I can. It's not my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault, right? I am not. What I'm saying is that recognize that you're having a stress response and you get to allow the stress response. And you don't have to judge yourself because of the stress response, right? And we want to flee from it. We have the anxiety over it. We have, and listen, if you've been doing this for a long time, you've been doing it a long time. Your brain is like, yep, that's what we do. I have a stress response. I get stressed about the stress response. And then I get stressed about the stress that I'm having because of the stress response. And I keep going and I push through and I'm like, do you remember when I talked about anti-fragile? If you find that podcast, that video, I don't remember which one it was. Second one, maybe. We are meant to struggle. We don't have to judge ourselves for it. We don't have to stress out over it, right? We just get to feel the emotions and we don't have to judge ourselves for them. We get to have all of the emotions. That's what I mean when I say gladden your heart, right? We want to feel sad about things. We want to feel stress is going to happen. We don't want to feel it, but we need to feel it, right? We don't want to feel sadness, but we want to be sad. Because we love people around us that are suffering. So we feel sad, right? We want that. We don't need to resist it. Same, like we're going to feel stress. We allow it, right? We allow it to flow through us. Thank you, brain, for doing your job. There's no danger here. And we're just going to allow it to go through us. Okay. And we continue to notice the thoughts that we have going on in our background that are creating this, like, I don't know what, I kind of think of it just like this. It's like this background of chatter that's going on that we keep listening to. It's like, yeah, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough. If I do this, I'll be this, right? And if a good mom does this, so I need to do this. And we are listening and answering that chatter when really we can be like, yeah, no, good moms also do this. I'm a good mom and I make mistakes, right? I'm a good mom and I don't do all the things, or I'm a good wife and I don't drop everything to do this. I'm a good Relief Society president and I don't answer every request right away, right? Both can be true, is what I'm saying. And we don't have to have the stress response all the time about those things. And we learn to dial that down a little bit and train ourselves to like look at those stress responses as not as threats, but as, hey, here's a chance to remember that I'm thinking differently about that now. Thank you, stress. You reminded me. That was a good thing. I don't think that anymore, right? Whatever it is. Or, oh, there's the email from the parent. That's okay. I'm just going to read it. And we're just going to hold space like I talked about last week, right? We just get to hold space. They showed up. I show up. Let's just see how this is going to go, right? Instead of creating the stress response. Oh my goodness, she's going to be unhappy with me and she's right. We have all of that. So I love this work because we are in charge of our human brains. Our human brains offer things, how human of it to do that. And then how human of us to be like, hey, I can do both. I'm going to make the mistakes and I'm going to love myself anyway. Right? So there I go, judging myself again. That's okay. That's what a human does. Right? We don't have to judge ourselves for it. No biggie. Right? So when you go back to the labels that we were talking about, I am a child of God. I am a child of the covenant. I am a disciple of Christ, right? I can bring that with me everywhere I go. And when my human brain pops up and tries to say, oh, but child, you're not worthy to be called. You can't call yourself that, right? You're not worthy, da, 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 right? You don't have value. You don't, right? That part of our brain pops up all the time. I don't know what it's protecting us from. We think, oh, if I think I'm valuable or of worth, I'm going to quit trying, right? That's the brain. Those are some of those little sneaky thoughts, right? That our brain pops up, and it's like, nope, you got to keep going. It's like, whatever, we're good. Like I can talk to my brain and just say, no, I am a child of God. I do have worth. It doesn't mean I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. I'm going to still do stuff. It's okay, brain. Let's go. And that's okay. Stress. Thank you, brain. Right? How human of me. Allow it, feel it, right? And just trust that your brain, how human of me. My brain is just trying to protect me from a danger that is not really there. And I just get to say, hey, guess what? Nothing to worry about here. Right? And it's going to be different for everybody. I'm kind of talking from my experience, but also a little bit from what I have seen in my clients, right? Worrying ahead of time feels productive, but it creates stress unnecessarily, right? And then that drains our emotional resilience, and then we're tanking out, right? We're running on empty. So your idea of hearing the phrase, I'm a child of God, could mean something totally different to you than it does to the next person. That label might create a stress response for you. Totally fine. How human of you, right? No biggie. But you get to feel it, look at the thought. Is it useful? Whatever that is meaning to you. And that's where I can help you. Like I can help you. Like why? Why does it create that response? What are you making that mean? And you're going to get to see some of those things in your brain that are bringing burnout, right? I want to light you up, right? Let's lighten up, right? Our lives. Let's have light. Let's be a light. And if you aren't, how can you be a light if you're taking down your own light, right? If you're burning yourself out, right? All of those things. So gladden your heart. How human of you. Have compassion for yourself as you're seeking a fresh perspective that will connect you to yourself, to God, and to the world, right? That's what we call having a glad heart. I will see you next time at Gladden Your Heart. And I hope that you'll click the link that I have down there for my burnout guide, my Lighten Up from Burnout guide, which I have talked about a little bit already in this video, but it's written for you. If you are burning out while trying to live up to some idea or some label, this guide is for you. I hope to see you next time. Bye.